here we go. So, all right, hello. Hopefully that's recording well and also visible for everybody who's online. I'm Nancy Proctor. I head up mobile strategy and initiatives here at the Smithsonian Institution, and I'm very happy today to welcome four guests, I suppose, to talk about mobile marketing, mobile device distribution and operations, and really just any mobile topic in general that the audience, be they online or in the room, might want to ask them about in terms of their mobile projects. So we're going to start off with Heather Foster from the Smithsonian Institution Traveling Exhibition Service, and she's in charge of all of their digital content online and was instrumental in the realization of 2 mobile apps for the Vermeer Bearden Traveling Exhibition, which traveled to the Memphis Brooks Museum of Art in Memphis, Tennessee. And we have Claudia Towell and her colleague Jane. I'm sorry, I missed your last name, Jane.
Janie Hornby. She's with the Education Department.
From Education. So thank you both for joining us, because we wanted to kind of hear from your perspective how things worked out in terms of these 2 very different apps traveling to your museum with the exhibition. And we know also that you have a lot of experience with providing tour apps for your other exhibitions at the museum. So we'd love to pick your brains about those experiences as well. And then after that discussion, we'll hand over to Bob Tarren, who is joining us from the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, where he heads up marketing and communications. And they too have been using apps in some really interesting and innovative ways. So we wanted to hear about his perspective, how mobile can impact brand and marketing initiatives, as well as obviously overall visitor satisfaction. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Heather, and just give me a shout if you need anything else. Maybe have a seat. So the Prezi is here.
Fantastic, thank you. All right. Hey everybody in the room, and I know most of you. I'm Heather from the Smithsonian Traveling Exhibition Service, and hello to the colleagues at Memphis Brooks that I have never seen before. So this is very exciting, because we have worked together but have never actually seen each other. But you all know, and several folks in the room know, that we worked on a collective of apps for a traveling exhibition that was about an artist called Vermeer, who was really one of the most prolific artists of the 20th century, and specifically known for his collage work. The traveling exhibition was made up, and still is actually, of a number of his collages and watercolors from a series called The Black Odyssey. And The Black Odyssey covered, just as you might suspect, the story of Homer's Odyssey. And we're talking about a poem that was written many thousands of years ago, if you're familiar with the Odyssey, more than 12,000 lines of verse, and one that's very, very dense for most people to engage with. But in the story itself, Bearden saw real applicability to modern life, and specifically African-American life. So he chose this story as a way to express his own feelings, to express the African-American experience, jazz, the blues, and so many varied stories that the series itself was one that was created in 1977 and 1978, and again made up of a variety of these collages and watercolors that ultimately came together for a very, very, very short time in the 1970s, and then the collection was dispersed until the traveling exhibition actually was created. So this was really one of the first opportunities for the pieces to come back together. So ultimately we saw a lot of potential in this exhibition. Not only were we dealing with a very influential and very famous artist, which had its own appeal, but we are also dealing with the story of Homer and its relevance in the 21st century. So we wanted to use this as an opportunity to speak to an entirely new audience of app users and a different generation of people who may not be entirely thrilled with the idea of reading the Odyssey or the Iliad. So creating these apps was certainly something that was on the forefront for us. And we really wanted to get people into the story, but we realized after we had spent many months in development that we had no money to market the apps, which is a very familiar story here at the Smithsonian, one I'm sure that's shared by many people across the board. But we've been, very, very pleased with the numbers that we've received so far, with very, very little money going into a marketing budget. Downloads from 38 countries and more than 1,000 works submitted to the Collective Collage app, which I'll talk a little bit about in a few moments. It's a collaborative app that allows you to reimagine and manipulate some of the works that are actually in the traveling exhibition. So the idea that we kind of came up with was really born at one of these meetings, and then somebody from the National Zoo said, well, let's go for the low-hanging fruit. And it really resonated with me because in reality, that's usually all that we can go for because we don't have a budget to spend on the post-launch of a lot of these products. So we came up with a short list of things that would enable us to do it right then and there. In other words, if we didn't have money approved, we didn't have to go through the channels that we needed to, we could put these things together on the fly and have it done within a couple of days. Those things included using the web, obviously, putting it in a banner on your home page, making the mobile icon part of your header and footer, so the static content on your web page, giving your mobile content its own page so that it's not relegated to ancillary real estate. It's really up and center as part of its own page. And one that I think is incredibly important, and I'll talk a little bit about, is create a graphics package. And we were lucky enough to have a developer that graphic designer on board. So not only did we have this real keen sense of the technical knowledge for our developer, but we also had somebody that knew art and that was really good at designing products. So part of the contract essentially was to create some ready-made, print-ready graphics that we could farm out to whoever we needed to, whether it was local print media or we could use in banners, et cetera, all over the web, social media. And I'll tell you, that was probably, we didn't know it at the time, but that was probably the best decision and the best contracting that we had done because it freed us up to do other things rather than engage a separate graphic designer, as well as have somebody that knew the nuances of what Apple would accept for their banners and for their artwork and that sort of thing. So a huge coup on our part, even though we didn't know we had actually achieved that. That kind of leads into the other point, is making the App Store or marketplace, wherever you decide to publish, notice that your app is available and that it's there. And that's obviously easier said than done, but there are connections out there in the mobile community and contacts through folks like Nancy and those that work those circuits that can make that happen. The idea of training your folks cannot be underestimated. And again, all these things can be done with little to no money, but having your own staff become an ambassador for your app, have folks walk around, the folks that were on the development team walk around and essentially handhold them if necessary to go through the content of the app and to get them to engage. Because ultimately, even though this is a digital experience, it's a person-to-person experience as well, and one that's infinitely more successful if you can get people to provide a testimonial as to how great it is. So a word of just internal marketing, I guess, for your own personal staff. Another very, very simple thing is just adding notes and marketing suggestions to your email signatures that are outgoing and internal. And if there's anybody from the Smithsonian listening, with a staff of 6,000 people, there are plenty of people that you can outreach to that have no connection to your project. So even if you're marketing internally, you're still doing something successful. Obviously, including it in your e-newsletters and icons on all print materials. No print material should be left untouched. So if you have an app that covers your whole museum, or even if it's an exhibition-specific app, you really should be providing your clientele, your constituents, your customers with the full range of your mobile products. And this is just an instance of one of the graphics that were created for our graphics package. So again, what we've got is something very basic. There's no words that are necessary. It just shows you that this is available in both markets, and then it's also available for iPad. Social media. Who can underestimate the value of social media today? And to some extent, I put duh on this because it is rather simple, but sometimes we forget about some of those simple things when we're looking for something grand and something creative and impactful. We forget about the little things that we could do on a daily basis. But obviously, there are things like your Facebook banners and dedicated space on your social media pages, whether or not you create a specific social media page for your Twitter page for that product, just for a week, etc. But just the idea of keeping it going on social media post-launch with clear hashtags that point specifically to your app, blog posts from different perspectives, a series of videos that you might create based on the production, the fabrication, the content. So reaching that market through a lot of different platforms and a lot of different topics. So again, leaving no stone unturned. And sharing it on your personal social media accounts. And I know that that's sometimes sticky for folks that do social media because they don't know where to cross that line between personal and professional. But I say cross the line, erase the line, you know, get it out there however you can. And very specifically, the hashtags that we have used to reach folks that were into museums and mobile are the ones that you see on the screen: M2Go, SI Mobile, Best App, Muse Tech, Muse Social, and it looks like I've got Muse Tech there twice. Obviously, it's that much more important. But you know, tagging your content so that people can find it is really, really important. And we even did that when it came to the app itself. When we were asking people to share content that was in our audio app, we made sure that in the share function, those tags were already included, so that when it went out there to Twitter or whatever platform it was already pre-tagged. All right. A little testament to this idea of video. This is a video that was created to market the app.
We're Guide One, and we recently partnered with the Smithsonian to create 2 apps for the Vermeer Traveling Exhibition. Tarren was a prolific American artist who made a number of works about Homer's Odyssey. The iPad app allows users to remix and create their own versions of Gibbon's Odyssey collages. The flow is streamlined so that users can enjoy the experience of making a collage in a few minutes and learn about the Odyssey themes in the process. The traveling exhibition will be on view until fall of 2014. Definitely check it out.
And I say this every time I see this, and Nancy's heard this 100 times, but I love that video. It's a great video. They did everything right in the creation of the video, and it really appeals to a young, hip audience that we think is the audience that we really wanted to reach with this. So not only did we think about, you know, creating this marketing video specifically for the app, but targeting it to an audience that we thought would already be engaged with that content.
That was part of the cost of the production of the app.
It was. That was part of the cost of the production of the app. I mean, we really did think about marketing ahead of time, even if we hadn't delineated a clear budget for it, and the developers stood to gain from this as well. I mean, that's the one thing that I'll say is that when an app does well, they do well too, and I think they have reaped some rewards from this. So It was certainly something that was on their minds in addition.
How much did the video cost?
Well, it was part of the package. So we didn't pay for it individually because we had said in the actual contract we want something quote unquote marketing, but really and truly that was something that they developed because they felt it needed to be done, and we had talked about it before. And this developer, I will tell you, they were super excited about helping however they could and saw this as a real need to be filled. And they took the reins and did that. So, kudos on a lot of different levels there. If you have just a few dollars, again, we're talking about less than a couple hundred to use in this capacity. We have thought about contests and giveaways, and obviously the idea of downloading the app and being eligible to win something, whether it's free tickets to an opening, a concert, a preview, a night in the museum, whatever it happens to be. And this could certainly be a part of your overall museum marketing strategy. T-shirts, tattoos, Facebook ads, Google ads, Moo cards, business cards that are passed out. These are all things that you can actually do online now with these ready-made desktop publishers that you can go out there, not be a graphic designer, and still produce some pretty high-quality materials that can be published in the thousands if you need it. Particularly Moo cards. We handed out about 2,000 of these little Moo cards, and what they are is just simple business-sized cards that have your logo, perhaps a QR code, etc., to a Teacher's Night program here at the Smithsonian, and I believe about 2,000 cards was in the range of about $300 to $400. So you really can get a lot of value out of that, and it's something that ends up in people's pockets, which is nice. And a couple of illustrations of these. Temporary tattoos, which Nancy and I had a fun conversation about on Twitter, and what they could do, whether or not they trigger a behavior if they're scanned or something like that, but the sky is limitless for what could be imagined for something like this. The idea of doing T-shirts that can be produced, obviously, online from a site like Custom Ink, etc. Very, very low budget, things that perhaps could be worn by your volunteers on day of launch, etc. And then in the bottom left corner are these Moo cards, and again, they're about the size of a typical business card, hard paper stock, nice quality things that can be taken away as collateral. Another instance there, there's the T-shirt. Cross promotion. Who in your community is willing to help you bring this to the masses? And are there folks out there with similar collections that would be willing to partner with you? And partner not in a financial sense, but partner in the idea of benefiting from the content. And maybe there's somebody out there at a local museum that also has a collection in the same realm. And perhaps they'd be willing to, put in something from their collection so that you would have a collaboration there of content, and therefore share the realm of possibilities for marketing and the financial resources for that as well. So the idea of looking for real partners is definitely something that you should do, because the groundwork, the legwork, the grassroots effort of finding real people who will engage with this and again provide those testimonials is really imperative. And that gets back to another concept, is throw a party, just like you would throw a party for the release of an exhibition or the opening of an exhibition. Why not throw a party for the release of an app that's launched? And Nancy and a couple of other folks were participated in a party that was thrown by a fellow in New York named DJ Spooky. And we were really, really fortunate that this guy, who happens to be kind of a jack of all trades, he was an artist in residence at the Met, a writer, an artist, a musician, everything that you could possibly imagine, has a very loyal following of people that engage with him on Twitter and all the other social networks. And he was one of the ones that mixed the music for this app. So he really wanted this to succeed and decided that he would get his peeps together in New York City and throw a party. And it was a lot of fun, and they did kind of a show and tell of what the app could do, and we saw a little surge in our activity in the Collage app. So we know that people were engaged with it after they were physically led through the process and kind of shown how to do it. And the other idea here is, you go for folks that obviously have a cultural interest in this, but you definitely should not forget about teachers and students and how they could benefit from your app. In many cases, there's educational content that might be built into your app, or maybe there's not. Maybe it's something that's for fun and it's a one and done type of content that you're putting out there. In any case, regardless of what it actually is about, think about how it might be used in the classroom and whether or not you can get real folks engaged with it to give you feedback. And we've been working with the Smithsonian's Ed Lab to actually bring iPads into classrooms locally and have students engage with the Collage app, the audio tour, and give us feedback, A, about how it could be better, B, what they might do in the future to get it out there to a larger youth audience, and C, to kind of take it to the next level. And we've had kids use the Collage app and then turn the material that they've created into Prezi presentations, videos, etc. And they've done a tremendous job in taking our content and bringing it to a level that we just never anticipated it. So it's really a win-win scenario for them and for us. Lessons learned for us: start planning as soon as possible. If you've got a 12-month period for development, or say a 6-month period, think about marketing just as soon as you sign that contract with your developer, and hopefully get your developer involved in thinking about how it might be achieved mutually. Try, if you can, to reserve some money, and that's, again, easier said than done, but if you can talk to your team about the necessary idea that post-launch is just as important as the launch phase and the development phase, you'll definitely be saving yourself some time and energy later on. And then assign tasks and follow through. So just as you would do with the development and fabrication of an app or an exhibition, there has to be a plan that's created, whether it's a social media plan or a formal marketing plan. And for us, one that I was really keenly aware of is beware of marketing fatigue. And I have been so personally involved with this. I do run site social media accounts, that I could post something about this every single day. And at first I did. I was posting something about this, whether it was, this was the latest review, it was featured, in the Apple App Store, etc. I realized that at first there was a big bump in the number of likes and followers that we got to retweet that content, and then it just fell off. And I felt like I had reached a crescendo from which I really needed to back up and say, okay, it's time to talk about something else. So really be aware of the fact that you don't want to oversaturate, but you also don't want to undersaturate. So there is a sweet spot there that you have to really know your audience to delineate. Be open to new ideas for use, and that's what I was saying when I was talking about the students. And one really fascinating case scenario is that there's a group of psychology students in Maryland that have been using our Collage app to explain different psychology phenomenon, for example, manic depression. And the teachers actually having the students visually describe those concepts with the app as opposed to trying to memorize the content. Now, that is not something we would have ever anticipated being used for that purpose. And to some extent, I think at first people were like, oh, well, that's not what we wanted. That's not what we used it for. That's not what we had imagined. And then we stepped back and thought, wow, this is fantastic. It's become so organic and so real in the world that teachers can use it, students can use it in a capacity that we had never anticipated. So we're actually cultivating that relationship and making connections with the American Psychiatric Association. Again, not a relationship that we could have envisioned in a million years, but one that seems pretty lucrative at this point. So with that in mind, just keep the content fresh, vary the content to some extent, obviously depending on the nature of your app. Keep it light. If it's light content to begin with, go with it. Don't try to reject stuff that doesn't meet your taste. And particularly in this case scenario, again, people have used the Collage app in ways that we just never could anticipate, and some of it has been really funny. And for folks that find humor in mobile content, this was actually really funny to me because the item that they have envisioned as an iPhone is actually a Greek shield, or originally envisioned as a shield by Bearden. So you can imagine that things morph in the 21st century into something else, and I also have experienced that where I have not been able to talk to Siri, and it's been very frustrating. So thought that was kind of funny, but again, not to reject that kind of content or find it to be too silly. We ended up posting this collage on our Facebook page, and it had a lot of positive response because there's humor in some of this stuff that you just really have to acknowledge. And finally, again, just the idea of being open to new ways to use the content. And in the background, in this particular instance, is a collage that was created by one of the users, and then we just used a different app, I think it's called Word Photo, to just change it up and to think about how we might be able to use imagery in a new way. So the nice thing is the content that's coming into us is content that we own and that we can use, and that's something that I also would suggest to some extent. Is there something that you can get back out of the app that you can in turn use to market the app again? So if anybody out there in the universe, the online universe, needs to contact me or ask questions, just find my content here. And the addresses that you see at the bottom are for the Bearden website, as well as the online gallery that includes a whole host of publicly created crowdsourced collages that are now numbering above 1,000 in the short time that we've had the app launch. So we're quite happy about that, and feel free to contact me with questions. Yeah.
Just stay right there, because I'm going to come over and flip the view over so you can see Claudia, and hopefully she can still see you.
Yes, I can see you.
Here we go.
I know,
Hi,
it's
Claudia.
very confusing.
Hello.
So yeah, so we'd love to hear your kind of reflections, Claudia and Jane, on this project. And as I said, feel free to add in anything else that you've learned from other mobile projects you've worked on that you think we might benefit from in terms of understanding how to do marketing better, mobile operations, and in general, getting return out of our investment in mobile.
Well, I like to start by saying that the Brooks is a small institution, and we definitely work with a very limited budget and a very reduced number of people here. And therefore, with those limitations in mind, we have to come up with the Brooks app and decide what do we really want to get out of it. We decided not to put video into it. We decided that we wanted something simple, but that will be primarily used for audio tours. So our visitors could actually engage and have a much better experience with the art once they arrive to the museum, or even beyond the walls of the museum. When visitors are planning their visit and they want to see what they're going to experience. So with that in mind, we started a pilot app in 2010 for the exhibition of Who Shall Rock, and from that point on, we saw the tremendous effectiveness of having the audio tour and how much our visitors really enjoy having this experience. And we developed after that Brooks app, and from that point on, we have an audio tour for every major traveling exhibition. We have 75 eye touches that we offer to visitors through our visitor services area, and those we title as kiosk devices. They really only provide the audio tour via the Brooks app to visitors, and then the Brooks app itself can be downloaded via the iPhone and Android, and people can see our upcoming events, current exhibitions, and obviously have the audio tour. We have the permanent collection in Spanish and English, and we have a kids version and an adult version. And we have, again, each major traveling exhibition, we have an audio tour that we create ourselves usually. The Vermeer Bearden was an exception. We contact people from the community, artists, curators, and they all participate. And the education department works really hard in putting together these audio tours. The marketing of the app, it really has been very little money spent. Just like Heather mentioned earlier, it has been primarily putting it everywhere that we have access to all our print materials, using our website, using social media. Um, we did do, for instance, with the, we recently had a Tiffany lamp exhibition, and we had a contest where we gave out Tiffany phone cases to people who brought in the Brooks app and showed the Brooks app on their phone. But we primarily has been very simple strategy promoting the Brooks app, social media, heavily in social media. Another thing that I like to point out is we really don't have that much signage in the museum. We realize that people tend not to read signs. And if we leave it up to people to decide on their own by reading a sign if they're going to take the Brooks audio tour via the app, a lot of them won't request it. But if there is an interaction, if they're approached and they're told about the audio tour and they are shown and that there is a personal interaction, 95% of visitors will take the iTouch device and will take the audio tour. We do have challenges with the Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi in our building is not, we really don't have it in the galleries. We only have it in the entrance area of the museum, and it's, even at that is somewhat spotty. So we're starting to really step it up a notch, encourage people to have the Brooks app downloaded prior to their visit to the museum, in case that they want to use their own device instead of using our own iTouch. But we're working, we have actually a grant where we are going to have Wi-Fi in the building, so we're hoping that that will improve quite a bit in the museum. Let's see, what other questions? Do you guys have any questions, Heather?
Yeah, actually, I do have a question. What kind of staff training do you guys do? Do you actually have a meeting where everyone comes together and you explore the various apps, and just expand on that, because I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you do your personal one-to-one training with staff.
Actually, our visitor services staff is a small group of people, which makes it very easy to train. I have another person in my department who really helps me quite a bit, or has helped me in the last few months quite a bit with the iTouches and keep all this process up to date. And we train the visitor services manager as well as obviously the person in my department who is helping me. And between the two of them, then they train the other visitor services people. And fortunately, they're all very young and very savvy with technology, which makes it really easy. And they're very good at customer service is a priority. So in that process, you know, we encourage them to also, if they see somebody through the galleries or at first somebody who seems a little shy, maybe not asking questions about how this is to be used, we encourage them to be proactive and talk to the visitor and let them know, okay, if you're having trouble, you need to do this or that. Fortunately, again, the app is pretty simple app. Therefore, there is not too much room for mistakes, and it's very easy for training purposes.
Now, do you all have protective services? Do you have officers on duty there as well? And if so, I just kind of wondered if they were trained as well, and if they engage with visitors at all.
Actually, I have to admit that that's something that we are discussing at this time on whether to train these officers or not. We probably will. There is a little bit of a language barrier with this subject, and we definitely think that training needs to happen in that area. We do think that a lot of the problems have been solved at the front end when people are being explained how to use the app. And again, because of the simplicity of it, that has worked to our advantage. But that's not to say that there hasn't been any issues in the galleries, and sometimes people had to come back upstairs to the visitor services area and, ask a question. And we want to solve that. We want to, not to have people have to come back upstairs, instead stay within the galleries and solve that problem. So that's something definitely that we are looking into. And I think Jenny had something to add.
Yeah, I was going to say I could add a little bit about how we use the Brooks audio tour through the app with our docents. We do, the education department has 3 or 4 iPads. We have a core group of docents that is trained to use the iPads, and we do use the audio tour and some of the functions of the Brooks app through the gallery. But again, it's just a select group that meets fairly regularly, and they are the group that knows how to use it and use them in the gallery.
I just was wondering, Claudia, if you'd like to make any comments about the process that we went through to get the Bearden Tour into your own app platform, which was produced by a different company than produced the Bearden app. I was kind of involved with our wonderful SI Mobile fellow, Joanna Perez-Strand, who did the bulk of that work, so I could see it from our side. And I'd just be interested to hear what that was like from your perspective of having content produced by somebody else kind of coming in and trying to integrate with your existing core app.
Well, I have to say that the process, I think it worked out fairly smoothly. You guys were wonderful to begin with. I know that we work with Kristen. They actually developed the Brooks app, and you guys work with them to be able to put all the content from the Vermeer Bearden into our app. I can tell you that from the visitor standpoint, we had essentially 3 audio tours, actually maybe 4 audio tours going on at the same time. We had the permanent collection audio tour, and its various functionalities for adult kids, Spanish, and so forth. And then we had Angels and Tomboys, which is another exhibition which is simultaneously to Vermeer Bearden. And we had Vermeer Bearden within our Brooks app. And then we were also informing the public about the Vermeer Bearden app that can be downloaded from the Smithsonian as well, because that app has a lot more content that the version went into our Brooks app. So the part that went into our Brooks app, I know that it was a little bit maybe challenging at the beginning for you guys, just because of the video aspect of it. We do not have the video capability, and numbering as well. We had to change the numbering for each of the entries of the Vermeer Bearden to fit within our Brooks app, so it wouldn't conflict with the numbering of the permanent collection portion of the Brooks app. But once we decide, we took care of those issues. I think the process was fairly smooth. We really didn't hear any complaints. I have to say, amazingly, we didn't have hardly any complaints from visitors on the usage of either of the apps for the Vermeer Bearden exhibition. We had to develop additional labels in the walls, and we had to make sure that the public understood which label to look at for which app to follow to get the tour. So there were 20 plus, I believe, pieces that had that were part of the Brooks app from the Vermeer print, and those had additional label on the wall that had our Brooks app icon. But this was first. Like I said earlier, we really usually develop our own content. And this was interesting. This was fun to go through this process, and I think it worked very well.
Well, it would be great, actually, if you happen to have any photos of that signage and how you dealt with the labeling that we could maybe add to the blog post where we'll post the link to this webinar. That would probably be really interesting for people to see how you solved that kind of potential conflict. And it's great to hear that it didn't actually confuse visitors too much in the end.
Yes, I think the key was having the Brooks app icon on the label and just the number right next to it. I think that worked fairly well. And yes, I have to check with curatorial and see if we indeed have some photos comparing the two. But I definitely can send the artwork that we had for that particular label if we don't have any photos.
Well, that'd be great to see. Thank you. And I'll have to say, from our side, I'm hopeful that it was kind of like watching a swan swim over the lake, that to you all it looked all serene and beautiful, and under the surface we were pedaling very, very hard, because it was a big learning curve to get the content off of one company's mobile tour platform into another one. And it surprised me that it was as difficult as it was. It was just, maybe difficult is the wrong word, it was just complex. It took a lot more time than I think we expected.
Yes.
And initially, I know we discussed, should we get Guide 1 and Tristan to use the TourML standard to essentially tag the Bearden content so we could do a direct import into your app. And we decided that since it was just a 20-stop tour, that it would probably be quicker to do it manually, to rebuild the tour in your platform, than to get the API and the kind of the import working well. And you know what? In the end, I think it probably would have taken just as long to do the API and to figure out how to do those imports, which then would have been useful knowledge to have for the future. So I was particularly surprised by that you think you've got all your assets, you know what the tour is going to look like, this is just a quick copy and paste, and yet somehow it wasn't.
Yes.
So that was really important learning for me.
Yes, even with our audio tours, I think that we're always on a stand mode of watching and see what little glitch is gonna come up. It's a little bit of an adventure every time, and we really don't have an IT department here. So sometimes we have to put our heads together and try to figure it out on our own, and test and test and test and test. I remember with Vermeer Bearden, there was an issue, now I recall, and I can't remember exactly what the issue was, but I do remember that we finally determined that there was like an extra letter or an extra character that was included in the assets that were put into content management. And to be able to find that was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. It took a lot of testing to be able to determine that, but once we found it, it was a smooth sailing from that point on. And yes, I mean, I'm sure, I'm just grateful that guys did this for us.
Well, we're really grateful that you took the tour along with the exhibition, because it was a great learning experience for us, and hopefully, really enhance people's experience of the exhibition too. So, yay for that partnership.
Yes, absolutely.
I think if Jane has something else she wants to add, by all means do so. But I thought I would also maybe see if Bob Tarren from the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts might like to ask you a couple of questions or add something. I know they've just launched an app called Wild at Art, which is done on the Toura platform. So it's another one of these kind of WYSIWYG mobile tour platforms, and so he might have some experiences to share as well. But I don't want to take time away from Jane if you had anything else you wanted to add in there from the educational point of view.
Do you have anything else?
Sure, I can talk. So my name's Jenny Hornby, and I can talk a little bit about how we use the collage app at the museum during the run of the exhibition. So it gets a few minutes. It shouldn't take up too much time. The education department organizes or designs an interactive space for all of our traveling exhibitions. And we had one with Bearden, no exception. So I mentioned earlier that we have a few iPads that we use on tours, and we put one of the iPads in our interactive space for the first time. This is the first time we put any technology in there. We purchased a stand that you can actually mount on the wall, and we put the iPad with the app pulled up there. We hold the stand low so that children and adults could use it. Claudia mentioned earlier that we don't have a reliable Wi-Fi in the gallery, so we were not able to use the share function. Basically what we did is people would come up, they would create their collage, save it to the iPad, and then one person was in charge of coming back to the iPad, once every couple of weeks or so. We would pull them all off, and we posted them on our Facebook page, the Brooks' Facebook page. In the end, I think we posted around 350 collages, and we got a great response from our Facebook friends. People were looking through the albums, people were liking them and commenting, and I actually brought a couple of examples of some of the collages that we had. There's one.
Nice.
Here's another one. They use the lettering.
Wow.
This one's probably my favorite.
Are those iPads?
Yes. Yes. So it reminded me actually of the one that you showed earlier, Heather, which was kind of cool. But in the end, we really enjoyed having that. It's a beautiful app. Also, we included a line about this in our curriculum guide that we give out to teachers. This is available for you. And a lot of our teachers in Memphis have iPads, and we heard that they really enjoyed using it in the classroom. The prompts were wonderful, very creative. There was a little bit of information about the artist, and we just received really positive feedback. So it was nice to have.
Great to hear. Fantastic. Bob, do you have any questions you want to ask?
No, actually I don't, but I think as I tell my story, something may reveal.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to invite Bob Tarren to come and sit at the computer now. And by all means, people feel free to interrupt online if you have a question, or shoot me an email. And hopefully have that email address on the blog post.
I'm going to turn this just a little bit without turning so that I can face you guys as well. And if I want to find the PowerPoint.
Okay, that's 2 chairs stacked there. So here's your PowerPoint. And let's see, bear with us 1 minute. I'm going to share this PowerPoint with the world. All right, so we're going to stop sharing that. And we're going to share this one.
Okay. So can I start with me and then come to that?
Yeah, so let's see if we want to move between. So see yourself, it's this one. And then the PowerPoint is here. So this one.
I'm going to grab my glasses just to make sure.
All right.
It blows up.
Claudia, are you all able to see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay, good. I'm going to start with me. So my name is Bob Tarren. I'm with the, trying to find myself. Where am I? No, it's opposite way. Got it. Okay. So I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts in Richmond, Virginia. And by way of background, we are about 80 years old, and about 2010 we came out of a 4-year renovation which significantly transformed the museum. We almost doubled our space, but more importantly our physical presence became one of a more contemporary light glass and steel kind of experience compared to closed red brick. Without joking, I can say that our front door was actually hidden at the back of the museum. So our major thoroughfare, which went right in front of the museum, had no front door. And that was both a literal and a metaphoric way that the museum used to relate to Richmond. The research that we have before I got there was that we were perceived as a very formal, not very friendly institution where you would find rich, older white people. And so the physical transformation was the opportunity for us to finally get to that. I was hired just prior to that, and I realized we had this moment in time where we could actually change the way people perceived us, because you get that when you do something as significant as a $150 million renovation. So we have this very old, staid, stuffy brand perception, and what we have been working on, what I've been working on for the past 3.5 years, has been a more progressive, dynamic, forward-leaning brand premise and brand promise. And as we've tried to execute towards that, we've tried to use technology as well as more traditional brand strategies and tactics. And so I'm going to run you through 3 things in particular: the Picasso campaign of 2010, the Chihuly campaign of 2012, and our current app development. I can say also that not only was our front door hidden in the back, we also were very, very challenged with technology. We're a state agency, which means not only do we have not enough money, but we're still thinking about things that were current 20 years ago as our contemporary point of view. So when it comes to IT and digital point of view, we are racing just to get up to the present. And with a little bit of luck, our next couple of treatments and projects will put us at least in a contemporary stance. So with that, I'm going to see if I can get us into one particular PowerPoint. Okay, that's me, and that should be PowerPoint right there. All right, and there's full screen. Okay, so let's see, and advance is right there. Oh, okay, good. So let's move over there. That's just a quick view of the institution. You'll see on the right part of that photograph, the one to the left, that's a view of the new museum and its airiness and expansiveness, and kind of speaks to what I was talking about before. We've got a big sculpture garden behind the museum with a pond and a pool, and just a really nice presentation as compared to where we were. The overall objectives for the Picasso campaign were 200,000 visitors and to increase our relevance to a young and tech-savvy audience. Go through this. I'm going to blast through this pretty quickly. The elements were, as you might expect, media, creative communications, a geographic focus, and innovative partnerships. If you have any questions, by all means interrupt me, but I think some of this is probably somewhat obvious to most of you. The way that we looked at our audience, I tried to simplify.
Well, sorry to interrupt you. I think at our end, at least, I don't know if this is happening to somebody else, but the PowerPoint is really not playing, or it's not showing. It's just
editor.
Okay, sorry.
in editing mode, and we can only see the first screen only.
Ah, interesting. Okay, 1 second. Let me try this. Can you see it better now?
Still the same.
Still the same. Okay. Let's see here.
If he was going through the slides earlier, he verbally was going through the slides, but
it wasn't changing?
Wasn't changing, correct.
Very serious.
Try this, yeah.
So
All
I will
right,
point that out so you don't think you're going through the whole thing.
Yeah, of course. Let's see. Okay. How does that look now? Are you seeing movement?
Well, right now we're seeing a strategic elements page or slide, but
okay. And has that slide changed now for you?
No, it hasn't.
All right. So let me try one more thing, which is
change to aiming the message.
you can see that now. Okay. So it's apparently not going to work
in full screen mode.
Weird. In full screen mode.
But
what we can do, keep it in this mode, and we will. Yeah.
Yeah, because when Heather was speaking earlier, we saw the slide changes, but it wasn't editing mode.
Yeah.
Full view, I don't think.
All right, let's make this as big as. Oops, that's too big.
No.
Let's make it. Let's try 125, just so they get the biggest. Okay, I'll do it at 100. All right. Okay. How's that? Can you see that? Okay.
Yes, we're seeing aiming the message.
Okay, great. Thanks, Claudia,
now
for telling us.
Now do you see measuring success?
Measuring success, that's correct.
Okay. So the point quickly here was how we viewed the audience in the most simplistic terms possible. The evangelist is another way of describing those people that are members of the museum, people that consume a lot of art and culture, people that are positively inclined to their experience at the museum, and also other institutions around the city. The far right is the unengaged grouping, which, given our limited budget, we simply would vote not to spend money and invest money in that group. But the middle group are the persuadables. That's the label that I've hung on them. And these are people that are neutral to VMFA, maybe have not been in a long time. They do consume art and culture around our market, and they also consist of some younger and tech-savvy audience. So with that in mind, we chose the persuadables for targeting all of our Picasso messaging, knowing that I could not afford to piss off the evangelists at the same time. Okay, so measuring success. I'm going to skip through this pretty quickly. It was all the things we did succeeded. We surpassed every projection that we had in terms of attendance, revenue, membership, etc. Our PR pickup was quite significant, more than 1 million impressions around the country, and economic impact. So how did we do all that? And social media impact, particularly Facebook and Twitter. How did we do it? Okay, so we did it through creative. And I worked with a local ad agency, a large agency that does some very significant national work. And because I knew the principles and I come from an advertising background, I was able to get them to work with me for this exhibition pro bono. Pro bono is a plus minus or good bad scenario. You get access to some significant horsepower depending upon who you're working with, but you then have to try to corral those horses and direct them on the path that you want. And that's very, very difficult to do. Even somebody as seasoned as me can sometimes lose total control of the horses and they go where they want to go. So you'll see some examples of that in the rest of my presentation. In order to make sure that the evangelists, that other group I referred to, got the messages that they needed to get in order to understand that the exhibition was in town, we did something that was more or less traditional, which is usually the name of the exhibition, a key image, a tiny description, and then the information about who, what, where, when, and why. I call this really kind of the business presentation. So it's what anybody in the marketplace would typically expect to run into. And it's competent, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not very edgy. And we have this giant window in front. It's about 100 feet from left to right. And we have about 500,000 cars that pass in front of this every single month. So this is a key part of our communication. Let's see, I need to move down.
You just use the down arrow.
Oh, okay. Okay, very good. So this was the thing that we did that was noteworthy and buzzworthy and got us a lot of attention. As you may or may not know, Picasso is considered one of the two fathers of Cubism. He helped create this destruction and reconstruction of art into elements and pieces that totally defied current thinking. And so what happened was the agency stumbled upon this concept of Cubism and deconstruction of Picasso, and not wanting to actually use a piece of art, we deconstructed Picasso himself, and we deconstructed him into QR codes. Now, you need to remember that in 2010? 11. I think it was 10. QR codes were not ubiquitous as they are now, and many people were, especially our kind of people, people that are technically savvy, were starting to investigate, explore, and test. But for the most part, the average marketplace, the average citizen, really did not know what a QR code was or did not know their functionality. So we deployed these QR codes at a point in time, and it was a very, very finite point in time, when they could drive a buzz that was augmented, or rather it augmented the buzz of the exhibition. And it was actually a matter of 1 and 1 equals 3. So the QR codes were all live, and they took you to a Facebook page that had a variety of elements to it, including a gallery of images, an opportunity to engage, there were share functions, and obviously like invitations. And so here's a couple of different executions. This one was a deconstruction of a slightly larger view. We use these in bus cards, airport Duratrans, full-page ads in the Washington Post, local executions around Richmond, etc. The web banners were also an advanced deconstruction of the QR codes in that we would zoom in very close to the raw element, the pixel, so to speak, of the code and then pull back. And that was also so visually unusual at that moment in terms of the web ecosystem. People had no idea initially what they were looking at, and then when it resolved to the final frame, it generated an awful lot of buzz. This is the side of a building in Soho, and so we just looked for places to intrude unexpectedly into people's lives so that people would say, what the hell is that? And that what the hell is that is, if you can actually create a what the hell is that moment that then leads somebody to do a behavior that you wish, that is also a version of the Holy Grail that they will follow through. In Philadelphia, I experimented with AR, and what we did is direct people to the storefront on South Street, and inside the window, which you'll see in the next screen, you were instructed to download the Layer app, and then by holding your phone through the window, you would get to see 5 images from the exhibition that actually were not there, obviously, and it would be a curiosity and a buzz thing, which generated a fair amount of media interest. And so here's another example. To my right, you'll see people passing by the window, and the 2 lines that blow up the window show what you would probably discover with your AR on your phone. Now, the downside to this is that it didn't execute exactly as we wished. The resolution of the images was poor. The GPS functionality that found the images seemed to be wonky, so that, for example, the goat in the middle might be over here, far to your left, or might be far to your right. It didn't stay still. It was moving. And so we got a lot of buzz, but not all of it was positive. And so there's some takeaways from that. When you dabble in a piece of technology with the people executing it, not directly communicating with you. In this particular case, the folks that put this together were vendors to the agency, and so I had a very distant relationship with the final vendors and did not have as much control as I should have had, would have liked to have had, and that's a lesson when you're working with technology that's still kind of not new and potentially wonky.
The technology is pretty unstable anyway, to be fair to you. I mean, even if you had it right under your thumb, you might still have problems.
For those of you that might not have heard that, Nancy was saying that the technology is still somewhat wonky and it's still a challenge for everyone. Inside every Starbucks in Richmond, 35 Starbucks, we deployed on the wall these black and white cards. They're called dog tags in the museum. Those are the little, well, I'm talking to museum people, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so the descriptive cards that would normally be to the side or underneath a work of art were attached to the wall in the Starbucks, inviting people to scan, again, with their phone and QR reader to, again, have the AR experience of finding a piece of art on their phone. And although that also worked in a somewhat erratic fashion, we seemed to get an awful lot of positive buzz in all the local blogs and Twitter feeds for trying. I'm going to blow past the rest of it. All of the things that I just showed you, plus more that I'm not going to show you, had the positive effect we were looking for. We were mentioned in places we would normally never get mentioned. You'll see there Mashable, Huffington Post, GeoCities, Gotham. There's probably 20, 25 tech, advertising, and forward-leaning blogs and newszines, magazines online that picked us up and talked about this campaign. And that put us in a place that the museum normally would not go. So then the rest of this particular PowerPoint I could skip over. There's things I would have done differently. The primary thing in this particular campaign was to try to get myself closer to the vendors that were executing through the agency. And that's a takeaway for anybody working with a big agency, either on a paid or pro bono status. The next thing I'd like to talk about would be my Chihuly campaign, which we just completed last year, 2012. And I'm assuming most people are familiar with Chihuly. And for us, our exhibition was very well received. We broke all records for revenue from our store, revenue from our restaurant, ticket sales, all that stuff. And in my mind and the mind of the curators, Chihuly is like cotton candy. It's interesting, it's visually fun, and there's really not much left over when you walk out the exhibition. It doesn't cause you to think, it's just a big smile. And the same agency worked with me, a different group of creatives. Each time I worked with this agency, I had a team of about 15 people assigned. And as I was describing in my brief to them what I wanted to accomplish, I told them I needed technology to act as a lever to increase my relevancy and credibility to, again, a tech-savvy / younger audience. Not that tech-savvy is limited to younger, but I wanted those two groupings together, and that not only did I want the creative to feel very contemporary, and that was somewhat easy to do at Chihuly, but I also wanted the marketing tactic toolbox to contain something that would be very forward-leaning. And as a result of that, we developed the app that was in the email that Nancy sent you, in case any of you have had a chance to download it. It's been downloaded from the Apple Store to the tune of over 50,000 times. And this app allows you to make your own work of art. You actually blow into your phone and then manipulate a number of controls to shape and color and texturize an original piece of glass work with multiple elements. And on one level, it's supposed to represent the inspiration and the art and effort of creation. On another level, it's just plain fun, and people seem to love blowing into a phone and manipulating things and coming up with colorful creations. Every creation that is developed around the world instantly gets into the gallery. So when you open the app, the first thing you see is the last piece of creation that somebody developed. And it's kind of cool to see because sometimes they're very simple. You can tell somebody's just working with the app for the first time. And then you see ornate pieces that you wonder how many days it took for somebody to create. So the sharing function was fantastic. The navigation controls were not the simplest. Again, the problem of working with a developer that was separate from me, separated by the agency in between, ended up becoming a problem because the educational content ended up being much more limited than we originally wanted. Again, this was a pro bono effort, so we got about a $400,000 project for the sum total of $40,000 cash. And the agency creating the rest of the campaign for me spent about $200,000 in man hours and about $30,000 in hard costs. I paid for the hard costs of production and nothing for the hours of their creative staff and account staff. So very happy to get all of that donated by a very large agency, and again, a pack of wild horses that I had to try to control so that I got the outcome exactly that I wanted. Now the Chihuly exhibition is in Montreal, and my counterpart in Montreal, head of marketing, is working with the same agency and the same developer, which by the way is Unit 9 out of London, and experiencing somewhat similar problems, even though I gave her my full experience. And so my takeaway, what I would do different again, is probably try to find the money so I could pay a developer straight up and then manage it like a traditional vendor relationship. And so to keep this moving, the last example is a generic VMFA mobile app. We don't have one, and we're engaged up to our neck in the process of discovery. So we're using an outside vendor that's being paid for by one of our trustees. So maybe the good news there is that we're actually going to pay to get an app developed with our thumbprints all over it. And then the downside is that we have a trustee with his own agenda and influencing a vendor that he's worked with. And so we have to be politically very sensitive as we work our way through the elements of what we wish and don't wish. The app at this point is just little pieces spread on a table. We still have not determined anything that I would confirm for you except our aspiration. Our aspiration is to use our very first generic app for the museum to be as forward-leaning as possible so that we could leapfrog beyond the technological gaps that we've had over the last decade or two and infrastructure challenges based upon having 5 or 6 different databases that don't talk to each other, a website that is nicely done but functionally challenged because we couldn't pay for all the features that we wanted. So the app gives us the opportunity to leapfrog over all of those prior handicaps and end up with something that we can feel is really contemporary, really relevant in the here and now, and hope that it can stay that way for takeaways that I can share with you is that I'm insisting that we have kind of a gamification function. I want to make sure that in addition to the more traditional app features for a museum, which includes navigation through the galleries and interesting information for the neighborhoods right around and background information on select pieces, and here's your typical 30-minute tour, 60-minute tour, 2-hour tour, the children's tour, the adult tour, all those things that we all talk about. I want there to be something that's just plain fun, that has almost no intrinsic value other than it's just fun to engage with and play with. So we're deep in the beginning stages of that. The team that we're working with just came back from New York, where they interviewed folks at a number of museums, including Natural History and MoMA and Met and Brooklyn. And Nancy, they do have your name and number, so you'll probably get a call. And so that's a bit of a snapshot from Richmond, Virginia, and open to questions. Philosophically, we've made a leap to put the visitor first. And institutionally, we have put the works first, the collections first, the curatorial and scholastic importance first, and visitor experience tailing behind that. This is one of the first project since I've been there where it has been universally endorsed that this is all about the visitor. And for us, that's forward-leaning because most successful, innovative, and contemporary brands already know that. And so for us to be able to catch up and then lean into that would be my first example of us leaning forward, putting not only today's needs of the visitor, but what we anticipate we could produce, create, deliver, and offer to the visitor in the future that they would still find relevant, interesting, valuable, and fun. Other elements that, the other thing I would say in terms of leaning forward is just to make sure that from the app functionality that we include the elements that, those features and elements that are best in class. Whereas in the past we would just band-aid what we could afford.
Where does the traditional kind of museum tour experience fit into that new vision of leaning forward? Is it still there?
Yes, we've actually spent a lot of time wandering our own museum and following people, stalking people, so to speak. There's got to be some kind of word for museum stalking. I don't know. Market research, evaluation, yes. We know that people get into our new front door and they get into our atrium, which is gorgeous, beautiful, and impressive, and stop and say, now what? And so we've created this wonderful environment that doesn't tell you what you should do next. And when people are wowed and impressed and given an opportunity to pause, they're essentially saying, now what do I do? And theme parks have known this for years, that there is an ecosystem in place for the initial experience and initial wayfinding and initial visual cues. So you go to Disneyland and you sort of know where you're supposed to go initially, and you end up at the Magic Kingdom. You end up at the, what's it called?
The castle?
Yeah, you end up at the castle, and then you're free to go. But they want you to go through the main street and get the sense and the tone and the vibe and the feel of Disney and get to the castle, and then you've got all these spokes in the wheel. We don't have a castle, but we do have this atrium, which is sort of our wow moment. But we haven't done anything to tell you which way to go because we have stairs over here, stairs over there, elevators behind you, elevators in front of you. And we had to acknowledge that we've not given our visitor anything to go on other than what we know are key things to not miss. So we're working on developing some cues and some potential tours to get you started.
And I guess this is a question that Claudia and Heather might even have some input on. I'm just curious what percentage of visitors to museums want to take tours. And the question is coming out of just the historical data, which shows that it's a minority of museum visitors who take tours, except for in some very special circumstances where it's really handed out to everybody with the price of admission and you're kind of told this is part of the whole thing, like Alcatraz Prison. But when self-selected, particularly in permanent collection galleries, particularly art museums, the take-up rates seem rarely to exceed 10%. In fact, quite often they stay below 5% of visitors. And I'm just really wondering right now whether that is a glass ceiling because that is the percentage of human beings on the planet who like to learn that way, or if it's a number that's artificially low because traditionally we're so bad at marketing our mobile tours and they're just not visible, or also, let's face it, there have been a lot of bad tours out there, and I think once people take one bad tour, they think they're all bad and they never take another one because they don't recognize that from museum to museum the quality might vary.
Right.
So I'm just curious what your takes are from your own experience.
Well, my take would be that I think all three of those things are correct. I think that most visitors do not want to be regimented into a path or a tour or a group. Leave me alone, please. I'm here to do it on my own. I do think that if we provide the opportunity for people to get started, if they choose not to or they choose to, either way, it's something we should be doing as compared to not do it all because we think most people are not going to pick it up. Our physicality of our building screams out for us to help people orient themselves, not necessarily hold their hand and not necessarily say, wait until 2 o'clock, because there's a docent coming, but rather, if you want, here are some things that will make it easier for you, and they're for you. While I was waiting for this earlier, I went to National Gallery of Art, and I picked up a sheet that was by the front desk that said things not to miss in the West Wing. And for me, that was great because I hit most of them because I knew I had a short period of time, and it's an overwhelming institution, and so I didn't have to do that. And I didn't do all of them, and I didn't intend to do all of them, but it helped me feel like I was not missing something out of that museum by going down a hallway that led me to the bathroom. Rather, I could go see a few pieces that other people said were important. And so when I finally got to the Vermeer, I thought, I've now seen something that's pretty cool, and other people think it's pretty cool. I may not totally understand it, but it had value to me. So I think that visitors, my take is that we as an institution win with the visitor, and the visitor gets the benefit if we can simplify and help them. And if they don't take it up, that still doesn't change our responsibility to making the visitor experience easier.
What I would like to add to that is that I can tell you about 4 years ago, we used to charge a fee, a very small fee, for audio tours. We used to have MP3 players, bulky, old-fashioned. People didn't want to pay. People didn't want to take them. They basically collected dust in visitor services. It was just extraordinarily hard to get visitors engaged to take these devices. Then we decided to make it part of the museum admission, and still people wouldn't take them. So price really obviously wasn't an obstacle, I think, in this case. I think once new technology came about, I think people finally got it as far as eventually it be something worth exploring. And I think it is very important. We have seen a completely 360-degree turnaround as far as our visitors and taking audio tours from what it used to be historically for us in our institution.
Because of an app?
Well, because of, I think it has to do a lot with the difference in the device, the look. I think a lot of people, when the MP3 players existed, they were not out in the whole world. Not every single person had one. It was something that it was more for, I guess, museums, to have this particular set of devices. They look like they just belong to a museum, if you know what I'm saying. Where an iTouch, well, your kid, your grandson, your niece, your mom, whoever had an iTouch, and I think they started to come out more and more, and people start to realize that, well, I may be able to explore one of them. And then when we put an additional staff person to provide exclusively help to visitors with these devices, that did it for us. It's the person-to-person interaction in our case. When there is not that person and there's just a sign that's left to decide whether they want to take the audio tour or not, then people won't take it. Now, there's still people, obviously, that will not take, they will refuse to say, I'm not going to take it right now, or I don't have time, or they don't mess with it. But for us, historically, in our institution, it has been 360 degrees.
That's good to hear, because one of the explorations for our mobile project is to dedicate a range of iPads or tablets of some sort available to our visitors to take the downloaded app as part of their in-museum experience. Even if they haven't already downloaded it on their pad or their phone, we would offer it up free. And I think what you're speaking to is somewhat of a form factor issue. If the form factor is both familiar and contemporary, then it feels better than a 10-year-old MP3 player.
Correct. Yes. And, you know, we don't know for sure is how many people do really finish the audio tour. That is some data we do not have. You know, we know that people take them with them and they're accepting them. How many finish and go through every single one of the stops? That's a different story.
Do you care?
Ask Jane that.
You know, I think from the personal standpoint, I would love for every single person to you know, be able to take it and care. There's a lot of work that goes into this process, so we want every single person to experience it. But I think to some degree there is a sense of, okay, we have done our job, I think, with providing the element and the resources and the tools and the information. And it's, you know, I don't know if we can do more beyond that point.
Right.
Unless then there is some sort of technical challenges in the gallery that we're not catching, and that's what we're discussing earlier, really getting security more involved in, you know, or volunteers to walk through the galleries and taking visual cues from what's going on and see if people really are, you know, continuing to use the tour. One question I had is, do you have Wi-Fi in the building?
We are laying down new fiber as we speak, and we have had pretty crappy Wi-Fi for 3 years. By the end of June, we should have Wi-Fi in our garden, fairly good speed in our garden and in 3/4 of the museum.
Okay, because that's, you know, when we first created the app, we had to change it to where the iTouches, we call them kiosk devices, and those had a different version of the app compared to the full app.
Because you didn't have good Wi-Fi.
Correct.
Back to the other point, in terms of how many people fully use the audio tour, from my point of view, visitor engagement versus visitor unengagement is a kind of a yes/no thing, and anything that can help get that level of engagement up is success. So if somebody does take your device and uses it half the time as they're experiencing your museum, that's a huge win. Because there's something that's going on that's enhancing their experience and delivering some educational content, and also still putting it in their hands to determine.
But it may not be optimized, and this is where, you know, one of my kind of pleas to companies like Tristan and Guide One and Tura is to integrate metrics tools into these apps, so we know if they're engaged for 1 stop or 2 stops or 20 stops. Because if they're only engaged for 2, then let's build mobile experiences that are tailored to that time of engagement. let's not waste our money building X 18 stops that
Building a
nobody ever
novel
listens
when
to.
somebody just wants a short story.
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. And it's been, again, one of these historical problems that goes right back to the audio tour industry, that finding out about content usage is just not very easy. Mobile websites, it's a lot easier. Then you can just embed Google Analytics or whatever if your tour happens to be a mobile website, but you then need the Wi-Fi throughout the building
Right.
to do that. So it's definitely, in addition to the marketing, I would say the mobile metrics is an area where there's still an awful lot of effort for us to invest in order to start optimizing our mobile products.
And Nancy, I'm really glad that you made this point, because as I think about going back and kind of sharing some high points of this with my team and my boss, I have been concerned that we're developing something that maybe we want and need. Even though I just said we're trying to put the visitor first, it's still our wish list of things that the visitor wants. And again, the short story versus novel is a concern. And so thanks for validating that's the right question.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming to speak. We don't have to shut down right here on the dot if somebody else has a burning point they want to contribute, but we probably should let Bob get to his next meeting and Claudia and Jane get back to work as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Oh,
Real quick to Bob.
1 second. Do you mind just trotting, because I'm just not sure how well this microphone is reaching over there. Sorry, Heather.
Just hi, ladies. Just a question for Bob, and it really relates to content and that idea of the novel versus the short story. That perhaps for us was the hardest sell with the creation of the audio tour, and I know that the folks at Memphis Brooks might have experienced this as well, because of the fact that you bring in so many curators and you bring in so many experts that are sharing their content, and the story is a story of an entire work of art is really hard to whittle down to 90 seconds.
Right.
And we started with a script that was many, many pages. In fact, for a 20-stop tour, I think our initial script was 45 pages. And we were advised that we start whittling that down. But ultimately, we had to compromise between the curator's point of view and then our knowledge that people weren't going to listen to that much content. And as the person that was more interested in making sure that people were engaged and listened to the full story, we did have to compromise. And I think in many instances there were stops that we knew people wouldn't listen to the full story because it was just too much. But that will be a fight that I'm sure that you will have to experience. And,
yes.
There's this, again, that concept of a sweet spot. At what point does the content become extraneous if it gets too cumbersome and too technical and too much of a curator's tour as opposed to one that's focused on visitor experience and interest.
That discussion and debate will never go away.
Right.
Just yesterday, a curator kind of stamped his feet and said, this is all about the works. And that is, for my institution, having a lot of people with 10 and 20 years experience, putting the visitor in the discussion is not intuitively present. And so, yes, I will be bloodied having those debates.
It's kind of an unfair fight to some extent, but one that we all have to share.
Yes. Good points.
Great. Well, I'm so excited that we were able to record this for others to listen to and benefit from. We've certainly found that our earlier webinar recordings have gotten lots and lots of online views after the event. So thanks again to everybody. I will put the links online shortly, and there will be a blog. The blog post is already there, so we can also continue the conversation through that. So thanks, Jane. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Bob.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Everybody else? Okay, see you later. Bye-bye.